coming up next.
I'm the youngest of four, and my eldest sister is 6 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I came along, I was not planned. My father was very clear with me that I was a mistake. And so that was a horrible thing to accept from my dad. And when I asked my mom about it, she didn't say he was wrong. She just said he shouldn't have told you that. And so like it was just so here I am, this mistake. And as much as I love my mother, I learned so much from her. She was really spent by the time I showed up, you know. And my eldest sister became my parent. You know, I was 29. I was lucky. I was 29 when I got into recovery. And there may have been many, many opportunities in those 29 years that I completely missed because I was so busy drinking and eating my brains out and gaining weight and losing weight and trying to find a husband and, you know, like all those things that I thought were so important. And, you know, in recovery, what I've seen is that I put all that stuff down. And when I put that stuff down, I recognized the need, and I do talk about this in the book, to pick up another program because I put the substances down and I started doing what my mother was doing in our family, you know, and I became like this crazy, you know, pointing out all the things that were wrong in my husband and the people around me. If they would just do recovery like I do it, then they'll be okay.
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You're here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you. Hey, this is Tanya with Faith Over Addiction, and this is a show that helps those who are really seeking their identity in Christ as they are supporting folks who are struggling with addiction. It could be addiction of any kind, video gaming, all the way over to substance. What we know is you are the one who can be supportive, safe, and home for that person, both mentally and physically. You can't do that if your cup is empty. So let's get your cup filled up. We're here with Jessica Morris, and she's going to tell us more about her role as a spiritual director, her background, and her understanding of how she's come into alignment with her faith base so that she can serve others. So, Jessica, welcome to Faith Over Addiction.
It is wonderful to be here, Tanya. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, to talk about myself is becoming easier and easier over time. And what I will say is that at this point in my life, I'm 54 years old, and I have no problem telling you that. The old me would have never told you that. Everything was everything was a big secret before. And I'm 54 years old. And the reason I tell you that is because most of the time I still feel like I'm somewhere around 17.
I
Like
love it.
I'm sort of pretending to be a grown up, but what has really helped me to mature and grow and learn in my life is my recovery from my own addictions, and also from living in the family disease of alcoholism. When I was growing up, I'm what you would call an adult child of an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And so all of that, and it was actually, when was it? I celebrated 25 years in September. Clean,
Congratulations.
thank you. Clean from food and alcohol, and living in that sort of horror, which I don't need to get into too much of that, but what that's done for me is, so maybe, like, I guess you could say I'm sort of a 25-year-old, because that's when I really started to take off, because I was setting aside who I thought I was supposed to be. I was
Hmm.
setting aside what other people told me I was supposed to be. I was setting aside all that stuff and just following the direction of the people who'd done this recovery thing before me, and not caring really where that took me, which was huge. That was a huge miracle. And where it took me was to this amazing place I am today, which is that I just recently quit my 30-year career so that I
Oh.
could start writing and doing spiritual direction full time. And I'm very grateful to my husband for his willingness to take on the financial load and to throw me on his health insurance for now, you know. But that was a huge leap of faith for me to do that, even though I do, I'm married, and, he's making enough for us, to survive. But it was a huge leap of faith because I always thought I had to, especially in recovery, and this is important, I thought that I had to financially provide for myself. I had to
Mm.
financially give into the household. I had this really, my mother was the chief codependent, but she also was amazing woman, but she did all our finances. She did it because my dad was drunk a lot, and actually also a minister, which
Hmm.
was weird. Um, and so he was off doing church things, and she was taking care of everything in the family.
Hmm.
So I'm the youngest of four. So there were four kids and my husband, or my dad, which, there's a Freudian slip. The four kids and my dad. So she might as well have had five kids. And she was a school teacher full time. And she was doing everything in the house. And so I just thought that's what the woman does. Right. And so it has taken a very long time for me to get to the place where I can sit back without, I'm really even struggling with some opportunity guilt right now, because my husband, I feel, has given me this amazing opportunity to do, because I have two books that I've already written that have been published. But if you know anything about publishing books, you don't make a lot of money like you think you're going
No.
to when you first decide you're going to write a book, And so, my most recent publisher told me, in order to sell more books, you need to write more books and publish more books. And so I was like, oh my God, I don't have time for this. But I do have time for it now. And so this is a really sort of digressing introduction of myself. So I'm sorry about that. It's such a weird thing to talk about, um, because I don't want to seem, one of the first things you learn in recovery is that You've got to set your ego aside. And, it's so a lot of what I'm talking about here, I didn't do this. And I need to be really clear about that. It's all been opportunities given to me that I've taken a hold of, or that I've followed, or that I've been able to see because I was clean. Like I may have had, and I was 29. I was lucky. I was 29 when I got into recovery. And there may have been many, many opportunities in those 29 years that I completely missed because I was so
Absolutely.
busy drinking and eating my brains out and gaining weight and losing weight and trying to find a husband and like all those things that I thought were so important. And in recovery, what I've seen is that I put all that stuff down. And when I put that stuff down, I recognized the need, and I do talk about this in the book, to pick up another program because I put the substances down and I started doing what my mother was doing in our family,
Yes.
and I became like this crazy, pointing out all the things that were wrong in my husband and the people around me. If they would just do recovery like I do it, then they'll be okay. That's what.
Let's pause right here and look at the model that your mom gave you. What did you get from an early understanding was the woman's role in what was a relatively conservative up, upbringing?
Yeah. That's very interesting because her role was everything a conservative, traditionally conservative, like when you get the home ec books from the 1950s and it says, have your husband's slippers ready for him when he comes home from work,
Absolutely. And a
like
martini, right? A martini and
yeah.
the slippers ready to go with the newspaper. Yeah.
And a drink, and a drink, so he can relax. And, so all that stuff, plus work full time and bring in the money because your husband is a minister. He doesn't make a lot of money. And the money he does make, he was probably using for things he shouldn't have been using at that
Hmm.
time. And so she just basically was sort of the center of everything. And I have to be real honest too, that by the time I came along, I'm the youngest of four, and my eldest sister is 6 years older than I am.
Hmm.
And so by the time I came along, I was not planned. My father was very clear with me that I was a mistake. And so that was a horrible thing to
Yeah.
accept from my dad. And when I asked my mom about it, she didn't say he was wrong. She just said he shouldn't have told you that. And so
Mm.
like it was just so here I am, this mistake. And as much as I love my mother, I learned so much from her. She was really spent by the time I showed up, you
Hmm.
know. Um, and my eldest sister became my parent, really.
Hmm.
And when you look at our life today, when I graduated with my master's, I think when I look at that picture, she's happier than I am in the picture. She was so proud of
Right.
me,
Right.
so um, it- what I saw was a woman working her fingers to the bone in my mother. That's what I saw. And
Willingly,
willingly, yes. I mean,
willingly saying, my role is to make sure everything runs
smoothly.
smoothly,
Yep.
at least from the outside.
Right, exactly.
So as she's doing this, what what are you seeing as her things for herself? Is she taking anything for herself? Is she is she teaching you all that you're important enough to take things for yourself?
You know what's interesting? She did, um, it's funny that you asked that question because I remember when I was very little, she had these little finger symbols. She took a belly dancing class
Oh, how fun.
because she
Yeah.
wanted to take, and she had these little finger symbols. And I remember I used to run around with them on my fingers. But I mean, she did go and get her master's later in her career, but a lot of that was because you get paid more if you get your master's. as a
Mm-hmm.
teacher at that time anyway. I don't know what it's like now, but and so no, she didn't really. I mean, she was the good minister's wife too. Like she was very involved with the church on all kinds of committees and in the choir. And I mean, it was just, and she, and God bless her, man. She came to every single one of our school plays and our sporting events. She had a little notebook. She kept scoring on the side. I mean, it was just, it she was in fact she passed away last year, and I had to keep cutting the obituary because I wrote the obituary and I had to keep cutting it because it was too long. It was just so much. She she knitted. She loved knitting,
Mm.
and she made over 100 Christmas stockings
Oh,
for
wow.
different to people as wedding gifts. Like she'd make
Right.
one for each of them, and then when they'd had baby, the baby got one. I mean, it was just it was insane. I'm tired talking to you about it. You know what I mean?
Where do you think she found her fulfillment? Did she know who she was? And where do you think she found her fulfillment?
You know what's interesting? I was just speaking with my fifth grade teacher because I went to the school where my mom taught. And my fifth grade teacher just recently got in touch with me because she wasn't able to come to the funeral and everything. And so we were talking about it. And I said to her, I said, mom had two friends from college, she went to a teacher's college. She had two friends from college that I knew when she was going to be with them that something was very different about her in a good way. Like she
Mm-hmm.
was excited about seeing them. They laughed, those three women laughed like I had never heard anybody else laugh, right? And the teachers at the school, that she had a different way of being with these people. It was like and it was like she was the real her with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
anywhere else, everything. And I'll also say that when I was very little, before I went to school and before she went back to work, and I had her all to myself when my siblings went to school and I was too young yet, she and I would sit and watch Mr. Rogers together. And it was the only time in the day where she'd stop doing what she was doing to be with me while, I was doing something. She'd sit and watch Mr. Rogers with me. And that was a very special time for me because I don't know how old you are, so I don't know if you watched
Yes,
Mr.
the
Rogers.
Mr. Rogers era. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so he was all about you're exactly who you're supposed to be. You are wonderful and appreciated, and and so that message came through him with her, I guess, is a good
Mm-hmm.
way to say it. In fact, the last thing that I did with my mother before she started to lose her mental capabilities, or I should say before we really recognized it, is we went to see the Mr. Rogers movie together. And it was just beautiful. I mean, yeah. So anyway, yeah, so that's what I grew up with. And so there wasn't a lot of you know, she was taking care of the family for the most part
So,
and covering things up so that the people in the church would they knew my dad drank, but they wouldn't know it was to the extent that it was in our home.
so she, if I could say this, and you tell me if I'm wrong, she was over functioning
Oh, absolutely.
and over
Absolutely.
functioning for everybody in the family and filling in the roles that were not there. When you became a young woman and you were looking at your life, was there a rebellion against the overfunctioning? Was there, I can't compete with that level of overfunctioning? How did you begin to formulate your role when your role model was an extensive overfunctioner?
Well, interestingly enough, at a very young age, my food addiction it's my first memory. Okay, so I believe I was born like coming out of the womb going, I want to go on a binge. Like that's just,
Where's
you
the
know,
piece of chocolate cake right
yeah,
now?
exactly. Like right now, let's do it, right? The alcohol came in pretty young for me also. I was sneaking alcohol. My dad always had it. My mom made a cough syrup that had alcohol in it, and I used to sneak that. And so I was sort of, all of my siblings were all, we all did well in school because our dad was the minister and our mom was the teacher. And so, you had to toe the line. But as soon as I got to high school and I was sort of like in the masses, I started to really falter, in especially in classes that I didn't like or I didn't understand. And so I just stopped trying. And I went down the party road, and I did enough that I was able to get into college because I played sports. And well, because I played sports and I was really good I majored in English. I was really good in that area. I was terrible at math stuff and all that. But I went for the party. Like, I'm not going to be this over function. I didn't know that word, but that's a good word. I'm not going to be this over functioning crazy person. I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to have fun. And so that was the other piece of it is I'm not going to be a jerk like my father when he drinks. I'm going to have fun. So that's how I rationalized it my entire time that I was drinking. I'm having fun. He's a jerk, you
So
know?
what do you think brought you into the food addiction? What was missing that you've, because you've got the over functioning parent, the under functioning parent, right? The one who is absent. You've got the absent parent and the over functioner. What brought you into, you said you came out of the womb with it, but there's some trigger. There's some trigger for that. There's some
Well,
trigger for the other.
I will say that my mother was like a lot of other moms, in the world, that food was one of the things she loved you with, and you got rewarded with food and, that sort of thing. And even at sometimes I was punished by food being taken away.
Mm,
Now, I used to think that was the reason that I was addicted to food, but I looked at my siblings and I was like, well, that doesn't really add up because she did the same thing with them. and
right.
and they weren't. So where it really, I think it was a comfort thing for me. It was, it was one thing maybe that I had control over, that I could
Mhm.
sneak it from the cabinets and nobody knew. And I could eat as much as I want because even at the table, we did not have a lot of money growing up. So, you got one serving at dinner and that was it. And someone else put it on your plate. It wasn't like I was grabbing for whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it. And so, I think it was probably a combination of a bunch of those things. And I recognized, and I think only a true food addict can understand this, because there's a difference between enjoying a really good piece of chocolate and binging on a head of lettuce,
Hmm.
right? Um, I was able to escape into the food.
What were you escaping from?
Everything. I was escaping from the fact that I was a mistake. I was escaping from the fact that there was sexual and physical abuse in my childhood. So, like it's just, and emotional abuse. Honestly, I'd rather you do anything else to me. Don't
Mm,
abuse me emotionally because that lives with me forever.
mm-hmm,
Like that voice, the things my father said to me,
mm-hmm,
way worse than any time he beat me, way
mm-hmm,
worse. And
mm-hmm,
so I was just escaping from all of that. I was escaping from the fact that I hated myself. I absolutely hated God because he put me in that family. I
mm,
loved Jesus though, because I looked at Jesus like he gets me because his dad beat the crap out of him too. Like that's how I looked at it. I mean, it was so sort of perverted to
mm-hmm,
look at it that way, because that's not the relationship that I see God and Jesus have today.
mm,
But at the time it was the thing that kept me connected.
mm,
Jesus understands me because he got his butt whooped too,
mm-hmm,
and he gets it. And so thank God for that, actually, because that kept me connected even in times when I ran away from the church, when I ran away from Jesus even.
mm-hmm,
I still loved him. I still knew he cared about me. I never went into that place of there's no God.
Mm-hmm.
or any of that. I mean, I knew he was there. I just felt for most of my life he didn't like me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I guess I was escaping from a lot. I was trying to escape from a lot. And I was going to do it different. I was going to do it better. I was going to be a better wife. I was going to stand up for myself, and I was going to be strong and resilient. And, I was going to do everything differently.
Right. And is that what happened?
No. Well, the only thing, well, I should say I don't have children. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have children. And I knew very early on, I don't want to ever have children. I was, at first it was because I was very selfish, and
Mm.
I did not want to have to deal with that. I did not want to have to deal with raising kids and all the stuff that comes with that. Um, but really, I knew there was a part of me that knew deep down inside that before I got into recovery, even, and I was being very promiscuous and everything, I always made sure that birth control was involved. I mean, even in my most drunken moments, because I did not want to pass this on to anybody else. I
And,
knew I had it. I knew there was something deeply, deeply wrong with me. And I did not want to put anyone else through what I'd been through in my life.
and so by not having children, there was no opportunity to do it in that way. There
Right,
was still opportunity to do it in your associations. So
right.
you knew there was something deeply wrong with you. Is there something deeply wrong with you, Jessica?
No, no, there's not.
When did you turn that corner? When did you say, I can serve as a spiritual director?
Oh, well, that's pretty recent. I actually, I didn't have the courage to go back to get more education until I was 15 years clean
Mm-hmm.
in my recovery programs before I even had the courage to enroll in a seminary. And I did that mainly because I'd spent those first 15 years in recovery getting well. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in the sense of working through those childhood traumas with a certified addictions counselor. And that was about almost a 5-year period where
Mm-hmm.
it was just like weekly with women's group and treatment weekends. And I mean, there was a lot to excavate and get rid of. And that was, thank God for that, man. And so I did a lot of that work. I did a lot of work. I dated a couple different guys in sobriety, which was really hard for me because for the most part, I always had a drink before I went out on a date. So being a sober dating woman was really hard for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just followed the direction of the women in the program around me. I'm like, tell me what to do, I'll do it. And I was just like, and they are like, don't let him in your apartment. Like, okay.
Right. Have
Yeah.
dinner, then you go home. If you need to drive a separate car, drive a separate car.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, but it really an elementary, but it really I needed to be told. And over those years, I started to recognize more and more that I was able to take care of myself, that I was able to, and I had turned away from organized religion when I was 18 and I went to college. I was like, that's it, I'm done, I'm not doing, but I never stopped praying. I never stopped wearing my cross. I always, I love Jesus. I always was a crazy Jesus fan. I watched, I don't know if you remember, there was a mini series when I was a kid called Jesus of Nazareth.
Mm.
They always played it at like Easter time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it went like 6 nights or something, but I had it on VHS and I would just watch it over and over. And that's how I just like would feel. And then once I get into recovery, I was grasping at any book that I could find about spirituality or the life of Jesus or, the dark night of the soul, anything that had to
Absolutely.
do. In fact, The Cost of Discipleship, which is a book written by Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
Mm-hmm.
um, is the book I think that gave me the courage and determination to go to seminary. I read that book and I was like, if this man could do what he did in the middle of World War II with the way, I mean, he was 39 when he died and he did amazing things. He did amazing things. I thought, if he can do this, I can be a grown up. I can put on my big girl pants and call the seminary and say, I would like to come for an interview because I really want to go to learn more about God for myself. I didn't
Right.
even know what spiritual direction was when I signed up for seminary. I just wanted to go get my master's.
Why don't you give us a definition of what that is right now?
Spiritual direction, I tripped over in my fourth year. I was part-time. It took me 6 years. And I just took the class because it was one credit and I needed a credit. And so I was like, I said to somebody, what's this spiritual direction class? And they said, oh, do it. You'll love it. It's kind of like counseling, but not really. And I was like, all right, whatever. I'm good with counseling. And so I took the class, and after 2 sessions, what they do in that first introductory class is that you have 6 sessions with a spiritual director so that you can be on the receiving end and see what it's like. And I knew I knew almost immediately I was going to have some extra time put on my degree because I wanted to get a certificate in this. It blew my mind because it is not counseling, which is what I was used to. It's
Mm-hmm.
real, what spiritual direction is, what I tell people to make it as simple as I possibly can, because it does get very, it's deep. It's deep spiritual connection with another person. And what I do as a spiritual director, I hold the space for you to walk with your higher power, whether that's God, Mother Earth, great creator. In recovery, I've learned that people get there however they get there. And it's not for me to say, either way. Now, I do Christian spiritual direction as well, where because I am, and I will tell anybody that I do spiritual direction with that I am a Christian. I can't hide that. Like, that's just who I am.
Yeah.
And it's going to come up. And of course, I would love for someone to have the great feeling I have in my heart for Christ. So it's not like I'm not going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also noticed in recovery that sometimes that's too hard for somebody. They
Mm-hmm.
can only start at a place where they can say, well, okay, I have a higher power. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
somebody created me. Okay, I can say that. So what spiritual direction does is it holds the space for you to grow in that relationship and to talk openly about it and to talk about your life and things that happen in your life with somebody who is an unbiased bystander who can point out to you, do you see where God worked there?
Mm-hmm.
Because someone can tell me this whole story about how she had a fight with her sister and, all this stuff goes down. And I see God all over the place, carrying both of them through it till they get to a place where they can actually talk again. But she can't see it because it's right in front of her.
It's in
You
the
know,
middle. Yeah.
it's too close. And so it's different than therapy, or it's different than counseling, in the sense that I meet with my spiritual director maybe once a month,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes every 2 months. The stuff that I do in between is very important. It's like anything else. I have to have a daily routine and a daily conversation with my higher power. And so it's really just being with someone and helping them. It's giving them. I usually start a session with, I'm prayerful about going into a spiritual direction session. So I'll start like, maybe like 2 or 3 days before I meet with someone, or sometimes I do group spiritual direction where there's 3 or more people in the room and they help each other as I help them.
Sure.
But I'll start with a poem because I'll be in prayer and I hear Eddie Hillesum, who was a Holocaust. She was actually killed in Auschwitz, but she was a writer, and I was introduced to her in seminary, and wow, she just wrote so beautifully. And so the last group spiritual direction I had, I took an excerpt from one of her books, and that's how we started it. And we took it through the whole session. They all could relate with her. They'd never heard of her, but and then it brings up other stuff in you, when you're given a quote or a poem or something? Where does that land? What do you feel like when you're receiving from someone? A lot of women have a hard time receiving.
Receiving it all, yes.
Yeah. And so I help, and I especially love working with people who are in the giving professions, especially ministers, nuns, priests, anybody who is doing that for a living needs
Mm-hmm.
somebody that they can sit with and just be like just completely honest about their own walk with God. Because
Mm-hmm.
you go into and I saw this about my own father when I was in seminary. I can't imagine what it was like for him to be. I mean, I spent so long hating him. I was his child. And I
Mm-hmm.
spent so long hating him. Like, what did that feel like? And what did it feel like for him that he's walking into a congregation full of people and he's maybe hungover and he's
The
got
double
to,
life, the double life that
yes.
all with an
And
addiction live is
yep,
how, and that shame grid. How do you
yes,
deal with the shame grid of, I haven't just done something wrong, I am wrong, which Christ comes to take away from us. So,
right.
how are you, when you are pulling all of this life experience together, how are you with the spiritual direction able to manage your own self and not be the overfunctioner? What would you say to women who are in that overfunctioning space? How do they come back to themselves?
Well, first of all, I loved gymnastics as a kid, and I always hated watching the balance beam because I was so nervous the whole time they were doing the balance beam. I think I know why I was so nervous about it, because balance is the key to all of this. For me, it was, and I was watching someone on the key to life. You've got to walk carefully and purposefully when you're on a balance beam. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just be, oozy doozy all over the place. And so for me, that's the key of all of this is balance. My recovery is still, God number one, recovery number two. And my husband gets it. He's third. He gets it, and that's okay, because he's in recovery too. So he understands the process. But for a long time, my husband was not a Christian. When we met, he wasn't a Christian. He had a higher power from
Mm-hmm.
recovery. And one of the times when I started to lose my balance in our marriage was about 3, 4 years ago, as the pandemic is happening. He never picked up a drink, but he put down his recovery. He stopped the meetings, and he was getting really sucked into the very angry political rhetoric of the time. And it was nonstop. He would have it playing on the TV or on, as he was online, he'd have it playing on YouTube or whatever. And he was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I grew up in anger and violence. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was really upping my family disease program, like I'm going to that program a lot because I'm thinking, how am I going to, and I'm praying for him. If I pray harder, if I do that. And what I recognized in all of that time is that I lost my balance, because
Mm-hmm.
what happened was I stopped caring so much about my own stuff and really just cared about, is he going to get better? Is he going to come back to recovery? How can I help him without being pushy, or, all the things that you learn in recovery about how to talk properly to the addict, all that
Right.
stuff. Like, so I'm walking a tight wire. It's not a balance beam anymore. Now I'm on that, up to it with and I don't have a pole to
You
keep
don't
my
have your
balance.
pull to balance you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but I should say that I did have a poll because I never stopped going to meetings. I was in constant contact with my sponsor, who was truly, she was the woman. I had several figures in my life along the way that helped me truly come back to my faith. my like very young childhood faith of Jesus loves me, this I know, and she said to me, I'll never forget this. She said, Jessica, she said, love Dave. That's my husband's name. Love Dave when he is most unlovable, because that's when he needs your love the most. She
What
said,
does that look like, though?
well, because that's what I said. I said, so I'm just to be a doormat? And she said, no, 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 no. I'm not saying be a doormat. I'm saying do not withhold love from him that you would normally give to him just because he comes from home from work and doesn't talk to you. So I'll give you an example. My husband, very hard worker. So he goes to work, he does his job, he's in charge at work. So people are coming at him all day. He comes home and he has to actually think about talking to me because it's like he just wants to shut down. And that's what he started to do. He'd go right into the TV room and watch the political stuff nonstop, right? And so what I was starting to feel was abandoned. I mean, all those things that you feel. And she said to me, make his dinner anyway and kiss him on the forehead anyway when you go to bed. Tell him you love him anyway. Put a note in his lunch anyway. Like all those things that you normally would do, do them anyway, you know?
And don't interrupt his process.
Exactly. Right. Like it's not my job to tell him to go to a meeting. It's,
Not your job to say, come to dinner. It's not your job to beg him to talk to you. It's not your job to
right.
function and provide whatever is
Right.
beyond what you would normally do.
Well, and part of it, right before I graduated from seminary in 2020, in May of 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic, I'm graduating. So for the 6 years prior to this sort of meltdown of dry drunkenness, I guess you could say that my husband had, he was struggling, and he never told me that, but when I would ask him to come to the seminary for an event or something, he didn't want to come. He's also at that time not at all interested in this God thing, and so I'm off here doing this wonderful thing for myself that I'm loving. I mean, I absolutely, those 6 years were phenomenal. I just loved every minute of it. But I couldn't talk to him about it, because he didn't want to hear it. And that's when she started saying to me, you just have to love him. He will talk to you about it when he is ready, but what happened was the anger that he was experiencing when he stopped going to meetings, because the stopping of going to meetings happened with the pandemic, right? Yeah. And so he had cut himself off basically from the community, that's another thing I would say to anybody who's listening. You cannot do this by yourself, ever. You need a group of people around you who are trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's church, your friends in church, whether it's recovery community, whatever, you've got to have people helping you. And so, because I saw that in him, like it plummeted. And what happened was, long story short, his anger started to come out at our cat. Like she would be scratching at the door, and she was new, she was a kitten, so she was really obnoxious. and she would be scratching at the door when we were trying to sleep, or whatever. And we tried all these different things, and she just was relentless. She's a tortie. So if you know anything about cats, they're very vocal, the torties. And so I think God gave her to us so that this all could happen. I'm serious. I look back on it and I think this. And because my codependency kicked into overdrive during this.
Yes.
So I'm getting up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to take a shower and then go in the other room with her, like start my day. Cause I start my day at 4 anyway. So I was like, okay, I'll get up so he can sleep until 5, but this is making him crazy because it was all kinds of chaos. And one of these particular times, I was in the shower at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I hear him out in the hall slamming doors around and yelling at her. He was trying to scare her, I think, by the loud being loud and everything. But she's really stupid because she doesn't have a scare in her. She just keeps coming at you. And so I had this moment, and I truly believe that I don't know if it was my dad or if it was just a guardian angel or whatever. Because when I don't audibly hear God in my ear, but I have this feeling that sort of goes through me. Like when I went to seminary, I remember praying. I have a room that I call my quiet room where I pray and in the morning. And I remember praying and being like, God, I know you want me to do something, and I think I want to go to seminary, but I don't want to tell Dave because it's going to cost money, and I'm scared, and I haven't been in school for 25 years, and what am I going to do? And I said, just be clear with me. I need you to be clear, you know. And now I've been praying for a long time prior to that, right? But
Sure.
that was the first time I said, just be clear. And I remember going into the bathroom to do my hair to go to work, and it came through me. Go to Moravian Seminary. It wasn't even just go to seminary, it was the specific
Go
seminary.
to this one.
Go
Yeah.
to this one. And I was like, oh. And I really felt like my hair blew back when it happened, you know? So that same course, and I did do that, by the way. The next day I went and I had an interview, and that's when I started. But I'm in the shower this night, so back to that story, and I had this same sort of feeling through me where I envision my husband killing me and killing himself. Like
Oh my goodness.
that went through my head, and I saw it. I saw the cat was dead, I was dead, and he put the gun and killed himself. We do have firearms in our home. And so I was just like, and it took my breath away. It really took my breath away. And the next morning happened to me a Monday, and I made a call on my way to work, and I mean I was hysterical. I was just hysterical. Like, how did it get to this? I'm sober, I'm clean, I've been working a program for 20 years. I should be better than this by now. What is happening? I'm blaming it all on myself, you know? And I talked to my sponsor in the program, and she said to me, we had just moved my mom out of her apartment, which was upstairs from my sister, to go into a memory care facility the previous spring. And she said, call your sister and see if you can come stay at your mom's for a little while. That sounds like a good idea. And I was like, I don't think I can do it. I can't leave him. I told God, I made a promise. I mean, even though I wasn't going to church, we had a church wedding, and I took my vows seriously. And she's like, all right, take some time and think about it, pray about it, talk to people, but it might be a good idea to sleep in the other room this week. Just put some separation between the two of you and give him another chance, because I had been asking him to go to counseling, that we could do. And so I called him that morning at work, and I said, I was really scared last night. I told him how scared I was. I was honest. And I said, I would really like for us to go to, I didn't even tell him to go to counseling. I'm like, let's go to counseling together. Let's, get somebody to help us with this. And he was like, no, there's nothing I need to do. I mean, he was so
Angry.
far gone at that point. And the following Saturday I left, and I took the cat, and he within a, no, it was the following Sunday I left. He was horrible the whole week. He was horrible. That morning he was horrible. And my husband paid almost for everything. He makes a lot more money than I did when I was working. And the only thing he said to me before I left was, let me know when you're going to start paying your share of stuff, or when you're going to get your own phone. Or, I mean, it's over, we're done, I'm not doing this. And I remember sitting at, I got my cat settled, and I had everything settled in my mom's apartment, and I went down to just hang with my sister. And I was telling her all this because she's my sister, I'm telling her what happened. And she says to me, you don't think he'd turn off your email or your phone or anything, do you? And I was like, oh, geez, I don't think so. But she's like, well, just check your email, make sure it's still there, because I had it on my phone. And when I checked my email, there was this pages long email from my husband. And, admitting that he was horrible, like all the things that I was thinking in my head, he was admitting them. And I went up and took a shower as you were leaving because I couldn't stop from crying and I didn't want you to hear me. And, I'm going to change and I'm going to go to counseling and all this stuff. But if that doesn't bring you back, I don't care. I don't want to live like this anymore. I need to get help for myself.
So
And I,
full recognition. This is what most women want. Full recognition that I'm creating my own issues with or
yes,
without you, because we
yes,
know sobriety is a very selfish program. It is, I am going to get well no matter what it takes
right,
to have
right.
happen.
And
And that all happened just because you moved out, because that's not always the story.
well, no, and you know what? That's not, and here's the beautiful thing about it. And I believe, Tanya, this is why it worked for us, is I didn't leave to get any reaction from him. I left because I was afraid and I did not want to live in violence. And that's how I grew up. And I was like, I am not going to live in violence.
So you did self-care. You didn't
Yes.
punish anybody. You didn't say you're wrong. You didn't say you need to. You didn't leave an ultimatum. You did
Nope.
very pure and simple self-care based on a dream that God had given you.
Yeah. It was a moment really. And based on my own personal experience of the past. What did I learn from my mother? I learned that when you stay, it does not get better. I mean, that was a huge thing I learned from her because she was going to stay and she was going to make it, and it never got better. It only ever got worse. In fact, they got divorced. My parents got divorced when I think they had been married like somewhere between 40 and 45 years, and my dad asked for a divorce, and they got divorced. And she spent, in fact, the apartment I went to was the one she went to when my parents got divorced. Like that's where she spent the remaining 20 years of her life. And you know, I learned that from her, but I also learned it from being a part of the recovery community and seeing people over and over again make the same mistakes, because we're human and we think we can figure it out. We think we're going to do it differently, but for me, when it comes down to it, and I look back over my journey, as I was reading my book a little bit before we started talking, just to, get in the groove of it, because this book was a huge undertaking for me, because what I talk about in here is consistently dying to self in
Mm.
order to better serve God and my fellow man. I cannot, as long as I am stuck in any kind of self place, whether it's self-pity or self-worth, if self is in front of the word, I need to take a step back, because I do know that I'm worthy. I absolutely know that without a doubt. But I don't ever say that I'm self-confident. I'm God confident. I know that God can do anything through me, and it has, like, I show up and then he does amazing things.
And
What
then
I
he
have
shows
seen,
out.
what I
Yeah.
have seen him do, one of the first guy that my husband called, the first guy that my husband called after I left was a guy that he had parted ways with because they believed politically different things, a guy in recovery. In fact, one of the three people who set us up way back in the day when we got together, he called that guy. Why did he call that guy? He wasn't talking to him for 2 years. That guy invites him to church. Are you
Something
kidding
that what
me?
he was not going to hear from you.
He's like, I'm going to, like, that's how we started talking again. He would call me on Sunday mornings after he went to church to talk to me about what the minister said and ask questions. And and the whole time it's happening, I'm just thinking to myself, what are you, like, God is showing off. What is happening here? I mean, it just blew my mind. And at the same time, and this is very important, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Life Recovery Bible.
Hmm.
my sponsor took me through in the time that we were separated. She said, let's take your part in the marriage through the 12 steps.
Because you have a part.
Because I had a
Jessica,
huge,
we're going to have to come back and hear more about this specific part. But for right now, tell us where we can find more about you. Tell us the name of your book. I'm sure it's on Amazon. We will, of course, have links below. But give us a little more about what you are doing right now.
you can find my book. Yes, you can find both my books are on Amazon. They're also, you can find anything you want to know about me and spiritual direction and the books, links to the books on my website, which is jessicalmorris.com. And you can contact me there as well. There's a contact page if you want to.
Fantastic. We're going to fill all that out below. Jessica, I can't thank you enough for being here. I want to interview you again, tease out some more truths, and especially what you did to say, hey, there were two people in this marriage.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was doing some things right and I was doing some things wrong. So Jessica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's been great talking with you.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.